Jannik Sinner and the possibility of a new sport. Join me as I dive into the challenge of seeing if tennis star Jannik Sinner will make a bold switch to a completely new sport. Jannik Sinner, a name that has been making waves throughout the tennis world, has been surrounded by speculation about what could come next in his sporting journey. The Italian tennis sensation has already achieved incredible success on the court, building an impressive career and establishing himself as one of the most exciting young athletes in the sport. With multiple ATP titles under his belt and a reputation for his powerful game, incredible movement, and determination, Sinner has already shown that he has what it takes to compete at the highest level. But while tennis has clearly been the main focus of his career, that naturally leads to an interesting question: could Jannik Sinner ever decide to explore another sport? At first, the idea might sound surprising. After all, Sinner has dedicated years of his life to tennis. He has trained relentlessly, competed against some of the best players in the world, and worked hard to establish himself among the elite. Walking away from that environment, even temporarily, would be a major decision. Yet athletes are often fascinated by challenges outside their main discipline. The skills that make someone successful in one sport can sometimes translate into another. Speed, coordination, balance, concentration, timing, reaction time, and mental strength are qualities that can be valuable in many different sporting environments. That is what makes the idea of Sinner trying something completely different so fascinating. Imagine an athlete who has spent years learning how to read a tennis ball, anticipate an opponent's movement, control his body, and remain calm under pressure, suddenly entering a completely different sporting environment. The rules would be different. The techniques would be different. The training would be different. Even the mental approach could be completely different. For someone as competitive as Sinner, however, the challenge itself could be exciting. Athletes often face immense pressure to perform. When a player reaches the highest level of professional sport, expectations can become enormous. Every match is analyzed. Every victory is celebrated. Every defeat is discussed. Fans want to know what comes next, while sponsors, media outlets, and fellow athletes all watch closely. Switching sports would therefore be far from simple. It would require an enormous amount of time, dedication, patience, and hard work to learn the fundamentals of another sport. Even an elite athlete cannot automatically become an elite competitor in a completely different discipline. Being physically talented is only one part of the equation. Every sport has its own techniques, strategies, movements, rules, and traditions. A tennis player might possess incredible hand-eye coordination, but that does not automatically mean they can master a golf swing. A basketball player may have excellent speed and athleticism, but that does not mean they can immediately compete at a professional level in tennis. This is why the idea of Sinner changing sports becomes such an interesting conversation. The public's expectations can also play a major role. Fans who have watched Sinner develop his tennis career may find it difficult to imagine him doing anything other than playing tennis. They have become familiar with his style, his personality, his competitive attitude, and his performances on the court. If he suddenly announced that he wanted to explore another sport, the reaction would almost certainly be enormous. Some fans would be excited. Others would probably be skeptical. Some might question why an athlete who has already achieved so much in tennis would want to take such a risk. There could also be criticism. Whenever a successful athlete makes an unexpected decision, people naturally have opinions. Some believe athletes should stay focused on the sport in which they have already reached the highest level. Others believe that athletes should have the freedom to explore whatever challenges interest them. For an athlete like Sinner, who has already accomplished so much at a young age, the stakes would be even higher. His success in tennis means that expectations are already extremely high. He is not simply an athlete trying to establish himself anymore. He is a player who has attracted worldwide attention, and who is expected to continue competing at the highest level. That makes the possibility of trying another sport particularly fascinating. When thinking about Sinner's background, it is clear that tennis has been his primary focus. His development as an athlete has been centered around the game, and his professional career has been built on years of training and competition. However, it is also interesting to look at his personality away from the tennis court. Sinner has shown admiration for other athletes and sports. Like many professional athletes, he appears to enjoy watching and experiencing sporting activities beyond his own discipline. That interest does not necessarily mean he wants to leave tennis, but it does show that his sporting interests are not limited to one game. In interviews and public appearances, he has expressed respect for athletes from different sporting backgrounds. Golf, for example, is a sport that requires a tremendous amount of concentration, patience, precision, and control. Those qualities are also important in tennis. A tennis player has to remain focused during long rallies. They have to make decisions within fractions of a second. They must control their emotions, adjust their strategy, and maintain concentration throughout an entire match. Golf requires a different type of concentration, but the mental challenge is still enormous. That connection makes golf one of the sports that naturally comes to mind when discussing Sinner's interest in other athletic activities. Of course, enjoying golf or another sport does not automatically mean an athlete is preparing to switch careers. Professional athletes regularly participate in other sports for fun, relaxation, charity events, promotional activities, or simply because they enjoy them. That distinction is important. There is a huge difference between an athlete casually trying another sport and an athlete seriously preparing to compete professionally in that sport. For Sinner, there is currently no clear indication that he is abandoning tennis. The idea of a complete sporting switch is therefore more of an intriguing possibility than an established plan. Still, the conversation is worth having because athletes sometimes surprise the world. Sporting history is filled with competitors who experimented outside their main discipline. Some athletes have successfully transitioned from one sport to another. Others have simply enjoyed testing themselves in a different environment. These stories remind us that athletic ability can sometimes extend beyond one particular game. But even when the physical skills transfer, the technical demands can be incredibly difficult. Consider the differences between tennis and another sport. Tennis requires explosive movement, quick changes of direction, rapid reactions, precise footwork, and the ability to generate power while maintaining control. Players have to move around the court while simultaneously tracking the ball and anticipating what their opponent might do next. A completely different sport could require an entirely new movement pattern. The athlete would have to start learning again. They would have to make mistakes. They would have to accept that they might look like a beginner despite already being an elite athlete in another field. That can be psychologically difficult. Professional athletes are accustomed to being good at what they do. They are accustomed to competing, winning, and receiving recognition for their abilities. Entering a new sport means temporarily giving up some of that certainty. Instead of being the expert, they become the student. For someone with Sinner's competitive personality, that could either be frustrating or motivating. It could be frustrating because he would no longer have the same level of mastery. But it could also be motivating because every improvement would represent a new achievement. Imagine Sinner picking up a new sport and starting from the fundamentals. At first, the movements might feel unfamiliar. The equipment might feel different. The timing might be strange. The rules might take time to understand. But then the natural athletic ability begins to appear. His coordination could help. His reaction time could help. His balance could help. His competitive mentality could help. His experience dealing with pressure could help. Little by little, the new sport could become more familiar. That is where the idea becomes especially interesting. Would Sinner simply try another sport for fun? Or could he eventually become serious about it? There is a major difference between those two possibilities. A casual experiment could happen during the off-season, or at a charity event. It could simply be a way for him to relax and enjoy himself outside tennis. A serious transition, however, would require a completely different commitment. He would need coaches. He would need training sessions. He would need to understand the technical side of the sport. He would need to develop sport-specific muscles and movement patterns. He would need to learn the strategies and tactics. And perhaps most importantly, he would need to accept the possibility of failure. That is something professional athletes understand better than almost anyone. Success is not guaranteed. Even the best athletes in the world lose matches, make mistakes, and experience setbacks. In a new sport, those setbacks could be even more significant. A tennis champion might suddenly find himself struggling with a basic technique that another athlete has practiced for thousands of hours. That would be humbling, but it could also be rewarding. Learning something new can provide a completely different kind of motivation. Instead of trying to defend a ranking or win another title, the athlete is simply trying to improve. Instead of competing against expectations, they are competing against themselves. That could potentially make another sport a refreshing experience for someone who has spent so much of his life under the pressure of professional tennis. Sinner's interest in other sports is therefore worth paying attention to, even if it does not mean he is planning a career change. Another important factor is timing. Professional tennis demands a huge amount from an athlete. Players travel constantly, compete in different countries, adapt to different surfaces, manage physical fatigue, and maintain a demanding training schedule. Finding time for another sport can be difficult. The tennis calendar leaves limited room for major distractions. That means that if Sinner ever wanted to seriously explore another sport, the timing would be extremely important. An off-season could provide an opportunity. A break from competition could allow him to experiment. A charity event could give him the chance to try something new without the pressure of professional competition. And those moments can reveal something about an athlete's personality. One moment that has caught attention is Sinner's participation in activities outside traditional tennis competition. At charity events and other public appearances, athletes sometimes have the opportunity to play different sports, interact with fellow competitors, and show a lighter side of their personality. These events are usually not about winning. They are about entertainment, community, and raising awareness or support for a cause. That changes the atmosphere completely. An athlete who is normally extremely focused during a professional match can suddenly relax and enjoy himself. That does not mean the competitive instinct disappears. In fact, some athletes cannot resist trying to win even when the event is meant to be fun. But the atmosphere is different. There is less pressure. There are more opportunities to laugh. And athletes can sometimes reveal interests that fans do not normally see during competition. For Sinner, these moments can provide a glimpse into the person behind the tennis player. His public image has largely been built around his performances on the court. Fans see his matches, his victories, his losses, his training, and his interviews. But an athlete is more than their sport. They have hobbies. They have interests. They admire other competitors. They enjoy spending time with friends. They may follow different sports. And they may simply enjoy trying something new. That is why seeing Sinner participate in another sporting activity can be interesting even if there is no intention of changing careers. It shows that he can step outside the familiar environment of tennis. There is also the question of whether his tennis skills could give him an advantage in another sport. The answer would depend heavily on the sport. Certain skills could transfer naturally. Hand-eye coordination is one example. Tennis players spend countless hours tracking a moving ball and responding with precise movements. That kind of visual processing can be useful in many other sports. Reaction speed is another. A tennis player has to react quickly to serves, ground strokes, volleys, and changes in direction. Balance and footwork are also important. Tennis players constantly adjust their position and body orientation. Mental strength could be even more transferable. Professional tennis is an individual sport, meaning players often have to manage pressure on their own. There are no teammates who can take over when things become difficult. A player must make decisions independently. They must recover after mistakes. They must stay focused when the match becomes difficult. They must manage emotions. Those skills could be valuable in many other sports. But there are also limitations. Technical expertise takes years to develop. No amount of natural athleticism can instantly replace thousands of hours of sport-specific training. That is why a potential Sinner transition would be difficult. He could be naturally talented, but he would still have to learn. And that is perhaps the most important point in this entire discussion. Being an elite athlete does not mean being automatically elite at everything. The world's best tennis player would not necessarily be the world's best golfer. The world's best golfer would not necessarily be the world's best footballer. Every sport rewards a unique combination of skills. That is what makes athletic competition so fascinating. Each discipline has its own challenges. Each requires a different type of preparation, and each creates its own definition of excellence. If Sinner ever decided to seriously explore another sport, the process would therefore be fascinating to watch. Fans would get to see an elite athlete return to the beginning. They would see him learn. They would see him struggle. They would see him improve. And they would discover whether his natural abilities could translate into something completely different. Of course, there is another side to the story. Why would Sinner want to switch sports in the first place? That is an important question. Tennis has already given him an extraordinary career. He has achieved success at the highest level. He has built a global fan base. He has earned major titles. He has established himself as one of the sport's most recognizable young stars. There would be a lot to lose by walking away. A sport switch could interrupt his development. It could affect his rankings. It could create physical risks. It could also generate unnecessary pressure. For an athlete who is still developing his tennis career, focusing on his primary sport would probably make the most sense if his goal is to continue achieving major success. That is why the idea of a permanent switch should be treated carefully. There is a big difference between saying an athlete enjoys another sport and saying that athlete plans to leave their current sport. The evidence for those two statements is completely different. At this point, the interesting part is the possibility, rather than the certainty. Sinner's openness to new experiences makes the conversation entertaining, but it does not automatically establish a future career move. Another factor is sponsorship. Modern professional athletes are not only competitors, they are also global brands. Sponsors invest in athletes because of their performance, personality, popularity, and connection with fans. A major change in sport could therefore have commercial consequences. Some sponsors might embrace the opportunity. Others might prefer the athlete to remain focused on the sport that made them famous. A successful transition could potentially create an even bigger global profile. But an unsuccessful transition could also create criticism. Every decision becomes part of the public conversation. That is the reality of being a famous athlete. Fans may feel connected to a player's journey, and they often have strong opinions about what the athlete should do next. Some might say Sinner should focus entirely on tennis. Others might say he should follow his interests and try whatever he wants. Both perspectives are understandable. Ultimately, the decision would belong to Sinner. An athlete's career is not simply about what fans expect. It is also about personal happiness, motivation, curiosity, and long-term goals. If trying another sport makes an athlete happy, there can be value in doing it even without competitive ambitions. Sports can be enjoyed simply for the experience. They do not always have to become careers. This is especially true for someone who has spent years under professional pressure. Sometimes playing another sport is simply a way to have fun. Sometimes it is a way to stay active. Sometimes it is a way to connect with friends. Sometimes it is a way to challenge yourself. And sometimes, unexpectedly, it can become something more. That final possibility is what makes the Sinner conversation so intriguing. What if he discovers that he has a genuine talent for another sport? What if he enjoys the challenge enough to keep practicing? What if his tennis career continues while he develops another sporting hobby? Could we eventually see him competing in a different environment? It is impossible to know. There is no clear indication that Sinner has decided to make such a move. But sports history has taught us that unexpected things can happen. Athletes change careers. Athletes discover new passions. Athletes compete in exhibitions. Athletes participate in charity events. Athletes explore activities that fans never expected. And sometimes those experiments become memorable parts of their careers. For Sinner, simply showing an interest in other sports is enough to make fans curious. It adds another layer to his personality. Instead of viewing him only as a tennis player, fans can see him as a young athlete who is interested in sports more broadly. That makes his journey more relatable. Many people enjoy more than one sport. Many people have hobbies outside their main profession. Many people enjoy trying something new. The difference is that when a famous athlete does it, millions of people pay attention. Every appearance can become a story. Every comment can become a headline. Every photograph can spark speculation. That is exactly what happens when a successful athlete shows an interest outside their usual field. The public begins asking questions. Is this just for fun? Is there a deeper reason? Could this become a future career? Is the athlete preparing for something new? Sometimes the answer is simple. Sometimes it is much more complicated. With Sinner, the safest conclusion is that his love of sport can extend beyond tennis without necessarily meaning he wants to leave tennis. That distinction matters. He can admire golfers without becoming a professional golfer. He can play another sport at a charity event without abandoning tennis. He can enjoy trying something new without making a permanent change. At the same time, there is nothing wrong with wondering what could happen if he did decide to take the idea seriously. Imagine a future where Sinner enters a completely different sporting environment. The media attention would be enormous. Fans would follow every training session. Every small improvement would be discussed. Every mistake would become a talking point. People would compare his performance with established athletes. And because he is already famous, the expectations would be much higher than those placed on an ordinary beginner. That would make the challenge even harder. He would have to learn while knowing that the entire world was watching. But perhaps that is exactly the kind of challenge that elite athletes enjoy. They are often driven by competition. They want to test themselves. They want to see how far they can go. And sometimes the greatest motivation comes from doing something that feels difficult. Sinner's tennis career has already demonstrated his ability to handle pressure. He has competed on major stages. He has faced experienced opponents. He has dealt with expectations. He has experienced both victories and disappointments. Those experiences could prepare him mentally for a new challenge. Still, mental preparation cannot replace technical training. If he were to move into another sport, he would have to respect the process. He would need to start from the beginning. He would need to listen to coaches, He would need to practice fundamentals. He would need to understand the sports culture. He would need to accept criticism. And he would need patience. That could be one of the biggest challenges. Professional tennis rewards immediate results. Players are constantly measured by rankings, titles, wins, losses, and statistics. A new sport would not work that way at first. Progress might be slow. There might be no trophies. There might be no rankings. There might simply be small improvements from one training session to another. For an elite competitor, learning to appreciate that process could be extremely important. And perhaps that is why trying another sport could actually benefit an athlete mentally. It could remind them why they started competing in the first place. For many athletes, sport begins as something simple. They play because it is fun. They play because they enjoy moving. They play because they love competition. Over time, however, professional competition can become complicated. Schedules become demanding. Pressure increases. Money becomes involved. Media attention grows. Expectations become heavier. A different sport can sometimes provide an escape from all of that. It can bring back the feeling of simply playing. That could be valuable for someone like Sinner. But again, that does not necessarily mean he needs to leave tennis. He could continue playing tennis while exploring other activities. In fact, that might be the most realistic scenario. Professional athletes often have interests outside their main sport. They use the off-season to relax and explore. They participate in charity events. They try new activities with friends. They train in different ways. These experiences can make their lives more balanced. So if Sinner continues exploring other sports, it does not automatically mean a major career change is coming. It may simply mean that he is enjoying being an athlete. That said, the possibility of a bold switch remains an entertaining question. What sport would actually make sense for him? Golf is an obvious possibility, because of the concentration and precision involved. Another sport that could potentially suit a tennis player would be something that rewards speed, coordination, and reaction time. But the choice would ultimately depend on Sinner's personal interests. The most interesting possibility may not necessarily be the sport in which he has the most natural ability. It could be the sport he enjoys the most. Passion matters. If an athlete genuinely enjoys an activity, they are more likely to dedicate the time required to improve. Without passion, even enormous talent can become difficult to develop. That is why Sinner's personal interest is so important. If he ever speaks seriously about another sport, fans will naturally pay attention. They will want to know why he is interested. They will want to know whether it is simply a hobby. They will want to know whether he plans to compete. And they will want to know whether tennis will remain his priority. Until then, speculation remains just that, speculation. There is no need to turn curiosity into certainty. One of the most important things when discussing athletes is separating confirmed information from possibilities. Sinner's career is already interesting enough without creating stories that are not supported by facts. His success in tennis speaks for itself. His interest in other sports is also interesting without needing to become a dramatic career announcement. That is why the idea of a potential switch should be presented as a question rather than a confirmed plan. Could it happen? Possibly. Is it guaranteed? No. Is there a clear indication that he is leaving tennis? Not from the information presented here. The future remains unknown. And that uncertainty is what makes the topic fun. Sports fans love imagining what could happen. They love creating hypothetical matchups. They love asking whether an athlete could succeed in another sport. They love comparing skills. They love thinking about alternative careers. Sinner provides an especially interesting case because of the level he has already reached in tennis. He is not an athlete searching for a sport. He is already an established star. That makes any potential experiment much more unusual. If an unknown young athlete changed sports, it might not attract much attention. If a major tennis star did it, the entire sporting world would notice. The media would follow the story. Fans would debate it. Other athletes might comment. Sponsors would pay attention. And every performance would be analyzed. That level of attention could make the transition even more challenging. Imagine stepping onto a field, course, court, or arena where everyone already knows your name. You are not simply learning. You are learning in public. Every mistake becomes content. Every improvement becomes a headline. Every comment gets analyzed. That is a difficult environment for anyone. Yet Sinner has already learned how to operate under public attention. His tennis career has put him in front of millions of fans. He has experienced the pressure of major competitions. That experience could help if he ever decides to take on another challenge. But again, there is no need to assume that he will. Perhaps his future will remain entirely focused on tennis. Perhaps the next stage of his career will involve even more titles, more major matches, and more memorable moments on the court. That is certainly possible. The most realistic expectation is that tennis will remain his primary sport. The speculation about another sport is simply an interesting side of the story. And honestly, that may be enough. An athlete does not have to switch careers for fans to enjoy seeing them try something new. Sometimes the most memorable moments come from athletes stepping outside their comfort zone for a few minutes. A tennis player trying golf, a footballer trying basketball, a basketball player trying baseball, a golfer trying tennis. Those moments can be entertaining because they show that even elite athletes can struggle when the rules change. They remind us that greatness is often specific. A person can be extraordinary in one area while being completely ordinary in another. That is not a weakness. It is part of what makes sport so interesting. Sinner's tennis ability is the result of years of dedication. His movement, timing, technique, and tactical understanding did not appear overnight. They were developed through countless hours of practice. If he ever tried another sport seriously, he would have to build those skills again. That is the real challenge. Talent can provide a foundation, but discipline creates mastery. If Sinner has demonstrated anything through his tennis career, it is that he understands the value of hard work. That could make him an interesting athlete to watch in any environment. The question is whether he would ever want to take that step. Would he be willing to become a beginner again? Would he enjoy the process? Would he have enough time? Would he be prepared for the physical demands? Would he be willing to accept criticism? Would his tennis career allow it? Those are all important questions. And right now, there are no definitive answers. That is why the conversation should remain open. Perhaps Sinner will continue enjoying other sports casually. Perhaps he will eventually become more involved in one particular activity. Perhaps he will never take the idea seriously. All three possibilities are realistic. The important thing is that his interest in sport outside tennis gives fans another reason to be curious about his future. Athletes are constantly evolving. Careers change. Interests change. Priorities change. An athlete who is completely focused on one thing today may discover something new tomorrow. That does not mean they have lost interest in their original passion. It simply means people grow. Sinner is still young and has plenty of time ahead of him. That makes predicting his long-term future particularly difficult. He could remain committed to tennis for many years. He could explore new sports during breaks. He could develop hobbies that become part of his life outside competition. Or perhaps something completely unexpected could happen. The beauty of sport is that the future cannot always be predicted. Unexpected moments are part of the excitement. That is why fans continue watching. They want to see what happens next. They want to see athletes face new challenges. They want to see whether young stars can reach their potential. And they want to witness moments that nobody saw coming. For Sinner, the next chapter will almost certainly be closely watched. Whether that chapter involves tennis alone, or includes another sporting challenge remains to be seen. What we do know is that he has already shown an impressive ability to compete, adapt, and handle pressure. Those qualities would be useful in almost any sport. But whether he wants to use them somewhere else is a completely different question. Maybe tennis is exactly where he wants to be. Maybe the challenge of competing against the best tennis players in the world is enough. Maybe his interest in other sports is simply part of being a well-rounded athlete. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it may be healthy for professional athletes to have interests outside their primary careers. A balanced life can provide perspective. It can create new friendships. It can provide relaxation. And it can help athletes avoid becoming completely consumed by competition. For someone competing at the highest level, that can be extremely valuable. So when we see Sinner trying another sport, the best approach may simply be to enjoy the moment. Instead of immediately assuming that he is preparing for a career change, we can appreciate the fact that one of tennis's biggest stars is willing to experiment. And if he ever decides to take that experiment further, then we can start asking bigger questions. Could he actually compete? How long would it take him to become good? Could his tennis skills transfer? Would he enjoy the challenge? Would he eventually compete professionally? Those questions would make for an incredible sporting story. Until then, there is plenty to admire about his tennis career. His accomplishments have already made him one of the most interesting young athletes in the world. His determination, athleticism, and competitive mentality have helped him reach a level that many athletes dream about. And his willingness to explore interests outside tennis only adds another dimension to his story. Perhaps the biggest lesson here is that an athlete's identity does not have to be limited to one sport. Someone can be a tennis player and still love golf. Someone can be a football player and still enjoy basketball. Someone can be a professional athlete and still be curious about completely different activities. Trying something new does not automatically mean leaving something behind. That distinction is important when discussing Sinner. The idea of a bold switch is exciting, but the reality may be much simpler. He may simply enjoy sports. He may enjoy the challenge. He may enjoy being competitive. He may enjoy experiencing different activities when he has the opportunity. And that is enough to make fans curious without needing a major career announcement. Still, if the day ever comes when Sinner says he wants to seriously pursue another sport, it would be one of the most fascinating developments of his career. Imagine the headlines. A tennis champion taking on a completely new challenge. An elite athlete starting again. A player known for one type of competition entering another world. The story would be bigger than the sport itself. It would be about ambition. It would be about curiosity. It would be about taking risks. And it would be about discovering what an athlete can accomplish outside their comfort zone. That is why the possibility continues to capture attention. People are naturally fascinated by athletes who challenge expectations. We want to know how far talent can go. We want to know whether skills can transfer. We want to know whether an expert in one field can become successful in another. Sinner would provide an especially compelling test because he has already reached such a high level. If he succeeded in another sport, people would be amazed. If he struggled, people would still be interested. Either way, the journey would be worth watching. But for now, the future remains uncertain. There is no clear indication that Sinner is preparing to leave tennis. His primary career remains connected to the sport that has brought him so much success. His interest in other sports can simply be viewed as another part of his personality. And perhaps that is the most reasonable conclusion. Rather than predicting a dramatic career change, we can simply keep an eye on what he does next. If he continues participating in other sporting activities, fans will notice. If he talks more about another sport, people will pay attention. And if he ever announces a serious transition, the sporting world will certainly have plenty to say. Until that happens, the question remains open. Will Jannik Sinner ever make the bold move into a completely new sport? Could his athletic ability translate into another discipline? Would he enjoy starting over? Could he become successful outside tennis? Or will he continue focusing entirely on the sport, where he has already achieved so much? There is no definitive answer yet. But one thing is certain. Jannik Sinner's passion for sports and willingness to take on new challenges make him an exciting athlete to watch. His story is still developing. His career still has many chapters left. And there is no telling what the future could bring. Maybe the next great challenge will happen on a tennis court. Maybe it will happen somewhere completely different. Maybe the idea of changing sports will remain nothing more than an interesting possibility. Whatever happens, fans will be watching. And that is what makes professional sport so exciting. The unexpected can happen at any time. An athlete can surprise us. A new challenge can appear. A new opportunity can change everything. For Sinner, the road ahead is still wide open. His tennis career has already taken him to incredible heights, but his interests, personality, and curiosity could potentially lead him toward experiences beyond the tennis court. Whether those experiences remain casual or become something more serious is something only time will reveal. So, what do you think? Will Jannik Sinner make the bold move to a new sport? Do you think his skills could transfer successfully? Would you like to see him seriously attempt another sporting challenge? Or do you think tennis will remain his only professional focus? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're a sports fan looking for more content like this, be sure to check out my other videos. And as always, stay tuned for more stories, more questions, and more fascinating possibilities from the world of sports. Thanks for the watching and subscribe.